Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. This is Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here tonight with the one and only Jacinta V. White. Jacinta, hello. How are you tonight?
I am wonderful. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yes, this is quite a momentous occasion because you are my hero. You are my shero, as I said earlier. You epitomize why I do what I do.
Aww.
In terms of putting myself out there, being an entrepreneur, being and living and fulfilling the poetic dream, and that's exactly what I believe that you do.
Well,
let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What is poetry?
So you want to start off with probably one of the most challenging questions for someone to answer.
Yes.
But for me, and I think, of course, the definition varies from person to person, but for me, poetry is the elevation of language. And I don't mean elevation of language in the sense that it has to be eloquent or elaborate or, some large words that are used. But I mean that it is, in poetry, I believe that we are paying tribute to words, to language, to emotion, to truth, to, I'm a spiritual person, so I believe that we are paying tribute to that inner voice and that inner spirit. And it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue with the page, with yourself, with God, with others, hopefully. So, I don't have one thing that poetry is. But if I had to sum it up, I would say it is the elevation of language.
Very nice. Now, as you think about your body of work, what are some of the predominant themes?
Loss. Loss,
right.
Grief, emptiness. Yeah, my last collection, or most recent collection, is Resurrecting the Bones, and that is really looking at the Black church and cemeteries in the South. But overall, I would say I write a lot about how do we navigate these heavy, difficult emotions that in Western culture we aren't taught how to sit with.
Now, do you think that a person can operate as a poet if they don't feel strong emotions?
I think it would be really hard, and they don't have to be heavy emotions or difficult emotions. You can, be a great poet and write about love and about nature. But I do think that you have to be in tune with your emotions and in tune with how to convey emotions. Because when we read poetry, we connect to the emotional tone of poetry. So I don't know that my opinion is it's really hard to be a great poet and not be in touch with your emotions.
Well, please share a poem.
Okay. Okay, you know what? I know what I'm going to start with. I wasn't sure, but it just hit me. And I am going to read a poem out of my chapbook, which is called Broken Ritual. And just a quick snapshot of me starting with poetry and a little bit about this poem. My father, who I was extremely close to, who saw my first poem published in the 1990s, suddenly had a heart attack and passed. And it really took my life in a direction that I didn't plan, and that I had to really focus on the grieving process and what that loss meant to me. So that's somewhat of my introduction to poetry and to my work with community. And so this poem is in honor and in memory of him, and he was a minister, and it's titled The Polishing of Shoes. It was a two-part ritual. Dad polishing his shoes after dinner on Saturday nights while exalting unusually high-pitched into the air what would be Sunday's sermon. His onion skin, thin paged Bible open next to him. Dad's large hand would slide inside the sole of one shoe, then the other, as he would lift each to the space right between his nose and eyes, an inspection involving precise angling into fainting light. The following mornings, after kneeling before the sunrise and rising with it was customary for Dad to put on his armor, filled with his freshly polished black shoes that waited for him at his bedside. It was a Saturday when Dad walked into freshly fallen snow. Who knew later that night he would not make his shoes shinier than stars in a darkened sky, or that his house would grow silent without his high-pitched preparation piercing air. No thin pages turning like leaves in the breeze. And that following morning, Dad would not go down on his knees, nor rise as the sun. He would not put on his clothes and collar, tie his spaghetti-thin laces tight. No, his black wingtips would not be waiting for him, but instead for me to take them home without him. So that's the polishing of shoes.
Wow. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Very, very touching. You know, all great writers or performers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them great in your eyes?
In terms of my poetic influences, Lucille Clifton, definitely. I love the brevity of her writing and the commitment that she had to have a house full of kids and be able to write. I'm reminded of that. Someone who doesn't have children and doesn't have a lot of excuses. That if you're a writer, you write, you find the time, you're disciplined, and you pour it out. Just a beautiful writer. And Anne Sexton. And Anne Sexton because of how she ends her poems. Sometimes I struggle with how to end, and I want to end it powerfully and second-guess myself. But when I read her work, it ends with a punch. And both of them really dealt with some heavy topics and in their time topics that weren't popular for women to write about. So there are a number of other writers and poets who influenced me, but I lean on those two, I would say, the most.
Now, what was an early experience where you learned that poetic language had power?
Ooh.
What was an yes.
Mm-hmm. That takes me back to growing up in church, growing up in the Black church in the South, and for Black History Month particularly. And our children's group and our youth group, we had programs, and we had to learn and recite poetry. We didn't have to, but there are options, and some would sing, and I don't have a singing voice or play an instrument.
Right.
But I loved. Let's do a poem. Me and my best friend at the time, and we would help each other memorize poetry and recite poetry. And I knew that it had power, not so much in the response that was given when we performed it or recited it, but what it did for me and how I knew that there was a story behind the poems that touched me, and I could relate to that more so than what I was reading in school. And so I would say definitely the church introducing me to poetry, and I knew the power then. All
right. Share another poem, please.
Okay. Well, what do you want to hear?
What would I like to hear? Whatever's on your heart. Whatever's on your heart.
Okay, what's on my heart? Okay. I'll read to Moxville. Moxville is a town in North Carolina. That's the state that I'm from and currently I currently reside in North Carolina. And growing up, my parents would take me and my brother to spend time during the summer with my grandparents on my mom's side, my maternal grandparents, and they lived in Knoxville. And I went to graduate school in Atlanta. And while I was there, and then after grad school, I worked there and stayed there for a while, but I just kept feeling this nudge to come back home and to do my genealogy and to, research the family roots and all of that. So this poem is a result of some of the research that I found. What I won't read, but I think it's important to note, is that I start the poem with the epigraph, which is a paragraph out of the local newspaper in 1967. But here's the poem to Knoxville. Your unnamed roads and unpaved paths stuffed gravel in my throat. Hid the stories behind my voice. I would cough up the following autumn. Nights I would cry in my dreams of hearing crows and seeing ghosts. Years later, who knew I would return, an adult looking for birthrights. Surprised to discover bamboo roots growing like orphans on acres surrounding my grandparents' home, 3 miles from the plantation they never spoke of, its name at the tip of our family tree. I returned to find your land nearly impotent, compromised tree limbs too weak to direct where I should walk, search, pray. A tumultuous tide rides within me as I stand, bruised and naked on your blood-stained back. I weep, seeing you buried underneath secrets and modernity. No monuments stand to tell the truth. No stones left for me to gather. No rivers running for me to dip my shame and regret. Your roots spread alongside railroad tracks, wetted to knee-high grass. My breath remains evidence of a previous union, and it is I who want to be taken in your arms, admitted to that there is some kind of love you hold for me and from me. Until then, your bamboo will never grow as high as the crow flies. That's to Knoxville. That's my love letter to Knoxville.
Oh, wow. Do you sit and think through every word of every stanza, or do you write freely and allow the words to flow?
I began with allowing the words to flow freely, unedited.
Tell me more.
Once an idea comes to me, but sometimes an idea doesn't even come to me, but I'm led to write, and it comes to the page, and I allow myself the opportunity to feel free in that moment, and just let it come, and sometimes on a good day it's something good, and then I edit it, and that's when I think about, is this the right word? Is there a better word? Is this really conveying what I want it to convey? How do I change the line length? Is this a stanza break? So I'm very strong in editing, but when I initially write, it's writing, Michael. It's just let me allow it to come out.
Share another poem.
Okay. So I'm going to move to Resurrecting the Bones, which is the collection in response to visiting African American churches and cemeteries in the South. So I'll start with the first poem that kind of sets up the collection a little bit. And it's titled, It Begins with Breakfast. Mary's on Trade Street. It begins with slow grace, words pouring over eggs and grits, soaking up biscuits and Labor Day sun. My uncle saying we should go, like Thomasine and Bushrod, without the urgency, still the rush to find what we don't know we lost. It begins with a nod and waving of hands, a midnight train that's gotten off track, a scribbled list of churches our fathers once pastored, We breathe shadows. We mumble hallelujah, moan instead of sing. It begins with the grief of digging dried blood soil and buried stories left dead. We drift toward dirt roads overgrown with loneliness instead, looking for the spot where it first began. It begins with stories, Sundays, sitting silently by cast iron pots of boiling water, so close the heat makes you itch. The smell of the fire cuts deeper than fresh poured tar. Tears stuck inside memories in your bones. That's the first poem in the collection.
What inspired you to write that particular collection?
It's kind of interesting, as I said in the poem, and this is pretty literal. My uncle and I were sitting at breakfast, and he says we should go visit the churches. My granddad was a pastor too, and we did, and we went to the first church, and I had a notebook because my idea was that I wanted to talk to people who may still be members who remembered my dad or my granddad, depending on the church we visited. So I wanted to record what they may say and all of that. But I found myself just capturing scenes during service and after service, still talking to people, but it just landed, it hit me differently. And I began to write poetry based on, it was the only way I knew how to process their experience and to capture their experience. And so we did that. We would go every first Sunday, which is Communion Sunday in most Protestant Black churches. And we chose a different church every first Sunday. And I, again, taking notes. And then I would stop at a coffee shop after church, after I dropped my uncle off, and I would write poetry. And I thought, there's something to this. And long story short, I applied for a local grant, a grant from our local arts council to expand the travel outside of North Carolina and outside of churches that were connected to my family. So I was in Texas and Georgia and South Carolina, visiting places, I had no connection to, but really wanting to sit in that sanctuary and listen to the preacher and the choir. And these are old churches, like shotgun churches, dirt road churches, not these huge, what do they call them now? I can't even, not these massive churches, but these small family situated churches with the cemeteries next to them. I grew up in a city church. We didn't have cemeteries next to our church. So
no, we don't.
Right. You have this huge edifice and, there's not a cemetery next door. So that interests me, and I was curious, and that curiosity led me to writing.
Wow. Well, let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back. My name is Michael Anthony Ingram. I am here with Jacinta V. White. Jacinta, your book, Resurrecting the Bones, is it available on Amazon?
It is available on Amazon, yes.
Now, when you think about writing, and again, you've done so much in terms of your professional pursuits, does writing energize or exhaust you?
It can do both. It can do both. Sometimes I'm exhausted by it. Sometimes I'm energized. But I will say, even when I'm exhausted by it, and the exhaustion would come from me wrestling with the topic. But even in the exhaustion, when I'm done and I get in bed, I feel such a sense of peace and joy. So I accept it. I accept the exhaustion if that's what is part of the process.
I think a different part of this same question is, what is potentially the most difficult part of the artistic process for you? And then conversely, what is the easiest part?
The most difficult for me is starting. In all honesty, is writing. Is starting. Is writing. I don't know how else to answer that. Sometimes I get in a groove and it's just easy and it's daily and it's flowing. And then there are other times, Michael, that I wonder, when am I going to write again? Like, when am I going to feel? And writers who do this professionally will roll their eyes at the statement. But when I feel inspired, when is that going to come? Because sometimes I have these droughts. So for me, that's the most difficult, when I'm away from the habit and the rhythm of writing, because I miss it. But it's just interesting. I miss it, and at the same time, I don't want to force myself to do it. It's really weird.
So you don't write every day. You don't write every day, is what you're saying.
I don't write poetry every day. I journal every day.
Okay.
But I don't try to write a poem or work on craft every day. I don't. No.
Share another poem. I'm enjoying you. Share another poem.
Okay. So I'm going to share the first poem that I wrote at the first church that we visited from, and with the second project. And it's called Church Mothers. Women in white dresses surround me after service like absent mothers longing for a baby's return to their breasts. Rejoicing, prayers for a daughter's return are answered, while they wait in line to tell me they knew my folks and how they knew me, young, in pigtails and knee-highs. They remind me when I was not yet full of the life I now hold behind my eyes. Pain taking up space I thought no one could see. Women, gray curls spiraling from beneath their cloth hats, twist both my arms in theirs. Take her to the altar, one says to the other. I am caught up in their strength, speechless and well taught to not resist this kind of salvation. We fall to our knees, caught by a purple velvet cloud and wooden rails. Blood and water sprinkled on my forehead. Forgive, they firmly whisper, their breath on each of my cheeks. Say you, forgive. Church Mothers.
Church Mothers.
Yeah. Can't you see them?
Yeah. I can't. If you were asked to convince a friend or colleague to read your book, what might you tell them?
Oh.
If you had to convince a friend or colleague to read your book, what might you tell them?
I have not thought of this, so we'll see how this rolls off. I would tell them that Resurrecting the Bones is, yes, about history and about culture, about Black culture, but it's also about how we can resurrect ourselves, that lost part of ourselves. And that this book for me is about a journey outwardly as well as an inward journey. And that I would love for them to take this journey with me. And then let's talk about it. I mean, that's what comes to me right now.
All right, I like that. Let's go on a journey together.
Yeah.
Inward and outward. You know, poetry is so powerful, Jacinta. It is so powerful. Where does this power come from? Where does it derive from?
I don't know. I would guess that, some might say it comes from their muse. Some would say, it comes from their experience and they were living the experience. For me, and particularly with this book, it was really a spiritual journey and inspiration, the true meaning of inspiration, and that I felt like the Spirit was breathing in and through me. And I have, poems come to me in my dreams as well. So, I don't know. I don't think I have the answer. For me, and this is why it's difficult for me sometimes to write, because for me, I have to be very still and silent in my life. Like, life has to be very still. And sometimes it's not still because of work and other obligations and planning and, all of that. So it's not as still for me externally, which sometimes makes it more challenging for it to be still internally, to the place where I can write, where I can hear and I can write. But yeah, for me, poetry is like a co-creation and a dance. And that's what I love about it, because I can have an idea of what I want to write, but I would rather be the blank page, I would rather just go, okay, what are we going to write about?
Yes.
And then try and craft it, with what I've learned about poetry. So that's a long answer to saying I don't know.
Well, you've accomplished so much. What is a measure of success as a poet? What's a measure of success?
Well, I think most poets and artists would say the measure of success is being published. It's having their work out there. It's having, maybe having a book, maybe having an MFA, which I don't have an MFA. For me, it's a combination. It starts with me finding satisfaction in the process and not in the product. And I think that's what keeps artists coming back to their art, is the process, the actual art making. It's interesting. This book came out, Resurrecting the Bones, came out in 2019. And I am so proud of it and pleased of it. And a poet friend of mine said, you're having a long run with this book, because it's 2021 and we're still talking about it, which I am so thankful for. But I will be honest and say I miss the process. I miss going into the cemeteries and listening and recording. I miss the call and response that I was really in tune with in these almost empty churches. I miss going, having my GPS getting me lost because it can't find the address for this church because it's like doesn't pick it up because it's in the woods, I miss locking myself into hotel rooms on the weekends to edit. So, and that's not to say I'm not thankful for where I am now and for this collection, but I think to answer the question, the measure of success often comes in the gratification of doing the work. That's the reward for me is the getting my hands dirty and the discovery process. That is, and thankfully it results in a book and people buy it and people invite me to talk about it. That's icing on the cake.
Yes.
But the cake, oh my gosh, is the process, I think.
Well, it's funny. That's my next question, and it's kind of funny that you use the word cake, because I wanted to ask you, what are some of the most prevalent ingredients that go into this concoction we call a poem?
Okay.
So if we look at it, if we look at a poem as a cake, what are some of the ingredients that go into making that cake?
Yep. So we've talked about emotion.
Yes.
So that's one that I would say. There's also an attentiveness, not only to what's happening in life and to the event and what you want to write about, but there's attention to how you want to convey it. And so that shows up in the form. Are you going to use a poetic form like a pantoum or a sonnet or a haiku or free verse? And it comes with line length. It is the rhythm of the poem. And, that can come with alliteration. So there's so many techniques. How do you use white space on the page? But I think the core ingredients, the ones you cannot substitute out if you were baking this, for me, I would think would be the emotions that you have, and also really paying attention to the form in which you want to convey the message. That's one of the main differences, not only, but main differences between poetry and prose. How are your lines? What are you doing with your lines? When do you want people to take a breath? Those are key elements. Are you using metaphors? Or is it literal? Most of my poetry is almost literal. It's not necessarily always, it didn't necessarily happen that way, but it's straight. If that makes any sense.
I'm listening to you. Yes, I'm listening to you talk. The teacher in you just pours out. It pours out. Do you like teaching? Do you like teaching about this craft, about poetry? Do you like teaching about it?
I do.
Tell me more. Tell me why.
Well, so there are a couple of things. Mostly when I am leading a poetry workshop, I'm really not talking about craft because I work with people who are using poetry or who are looking to use poetry as a way to process difficult emotions. So I work with, I had a session this morning with those recovering from cancer. And so we're not talking about craft, but we're looking at poetry as a vehicle to share the fears or the concerns or the joys. So there's that. So I enjoy looking at poetry with that lens. How do we express ourselves? How can we use metaphor and simile to express ourselves? What are some of our word choices? So that's one part. But I also, in addition to that, I also will lead workshops where we do talk about craft. And I enjoy doing it because for a long time, and for a long time I mean my childhood, I had a hard time finding my voice and finding something that I loved that I felt loved me back. And when I talk to people about my journey with poetry, I say that poetry is my lifeline, that it was my lifeline when my dad died. It's my, it has served as an altar. So it's a really special gift for me. I believe it's a God-given gift for me to have poetry in my life. And that then translates to the passion of sharing it with others, because I know how I benefited from writing. And I wasn't thinking about being a poet or being published, but it was a process of writing that in a lot of ways saved my life. And so it's a gift that I have that I want to share with others.
You shared just in terms of finding your voice. What is the relationship between your speaking voice and your written voice? Because, again, you speak with such eloquence. I mean, at least you are tonight. At least you are tonight. You speak with such eloquence. So, well, is there a relationship between the two?
Gosh, that is such a good question.
Well, that's why they pay me the big bucks, Jacinta.
Well, yes, they should. They should pay you more.
Well, thank you.
Is there a relationship? I want to believe that there is. I will say that I am more comfortable with my written voice. I'm more comfortable writing.
Really?
Than I am speaking.
Really?
Yes.
That's surprising to me. That's surprising. As I just listening to you, I'm like, wow, she possesses it all.
No. I am an introvert. Definitely an introvert. Love the silence and being with the page. It's interesting because that's what it feels natural to me. But I also would say that I grew up being like my parents honed me well in using my voice. I remember, and I grew up with my dad was a preacher, so every Sunday I heard him at a mic, preaching and people listening and responding. My mom is a retired school teacher. She stood up in the classroom, 5 days a week for 30-something years and taught. So I never got away with being silent or being shy. Once a year, the church would give a pastor's appreciation. And my dad, I remember being young, like 3 or 4, and he always had me to say something to the congregation. So they started me young in front of a mic. So I'm comfortable speaking, but my happy place is somewhere quiet with pen and paper.
Okay. Share another poem.
I know you can't tell that tonight because I'm talking, I'm running out. But
No, I can't tell.
With the fact that we're having a conversation, this is like mad cool. Okay, so another poem. I'm going to switch, talking about being a PK. This is still out of Resurrecting the Bones. The book is in 3 sections, and the first section deals mostly with the visits that I took and what I saw and the cemeteries and churches. And the second section is more about me being a woman, having grown up in the Black church. And then the third section is a universal and global look of what's happening in the world and in the nation, and some critique, perhaps, with how we're looking at that as Black Christians. So this is out of the second section, again, me as a woman speaking. And it's titled 12 Stones. I spent Sabbath water baptizing, head first, rinsing the week's sin, saying, I believe. Coming up, dreads drenched, the gospel of Nina Simone, from the bathroom's choir loft, playing. While praying generations will come bathe my back, read my palms, see the history and the lines around my eyes, smell the trials on my breath. I spent years walking over graves, bowing to read each stone-washed name. I tucked inside my pocket 12 stones. You ask when I return if bones can live. Listen on. 12 stones.
12 stones. All poets have several words that come up over and over and over again in their writing. They just can't help but use in their work.
Yep.
What are 3 of your absolute favorite words to use?
I don't know if they're my favorite, but I've noticed they come up a lot, and not just in this this collection. Dirt comes up a lot. Yes, I don't know what that means, but what are some other ones? So I play with this book with the words bones. So that was a little intentional.
Okay.
I don't know what my third one is. Do you know?
I don't know, but let's go back to dirt. Tell me about dirt. What about dirt resonates with you?
I don't know. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, it's so bad. So this is when I'm gonna act like it's just us on a phone call and no one's listening in. Let me tell you, the other week, honestly, I was like, I need to feel dirt. Like I need my hands. It's probably a part of feeling grounded and wanting to feel grounded. Right?
Okay.
And feeling that
right.
connection to the earth is part of it, I think. And I was craving feeling dirt. And I'm in an apartment. I don't have a yard. And I'm not, So last week, I went to buy flowers for I have a deck. So I was like, let me just do like some flowers on my deck. And I know nothing about flowers. I don't have a green thumb, but I'm talking to the lady at the shop. And she tells me also about this dirt that I need to buy because I have to pot it. And it made me so happy. And I was like, here's the dirt. Like, I need my hands in dirt. Yeah. We can delete that out if you need to. But
no, this is going global.
I can edit it all. Yeah.
There are no flubs.
Okay. Music over that.
No redos.
No, now.
That the third section of your book is primarily about what's happening in the world. Am I correct? I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
So much is happening in the world today.
Yeah.
So much is happening. What do you view as being the role of a poet in modern day society?
To bear witness. I think
to what?
poets,
to what, Jacinta? To bear witness to what?
What is happening, and so poets. I can't prescribe it and say, poets are to pay attention or pay witness to what's happening with the Black Lives Matter or what's happening with, racism and Asian Americans or what's happening with trans. I think it depends on who you are as a poet, because there's enough to go around for us to pay attention to.
Yes.
I do think that you can have a choice. When I wrote this collection, I was hoping to and attempting to bear witness to what it means to be Black and to be Black and not have proper burials and mass burials and unmarked graves and lost records, as well as, so that's historical, as well as what it means to be Black in a world that constantly is abusive to you, collectively. And so, but that's my lens, and that's what, but I wouldn't consider myself a poet that just writes about that. But it's to bear witness. It could be bearing witness to a parent that's dying, or bearing witness to the sun that's rising. It could be bearing witness to, again, the political upheaval around the world, bearing witness to the pandemic and how we responded to that.
Have you written about the pandemic? Just in terms of your journal?
Yes. Well, journaling, yes. I haven't done any poetry, but yes, journaling, yes, it has come up. Mostly me screaming about it, but yes, it has come up.
Right. The pandemic, as I just want to talk about just briefly, it's opened up so much for so many different people, just in terms of finding your way through it.
Yes. Yep.
Or finding a container to put it in.
Yes.
I mean, I know my writing has taken on a different lilt due to the pandemic. It really has. It really has.
Do you find yourself writing more, or is it about the same?
I find myself writing about the same, to be honest.
Okay.
But there's a different level of urgency to it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it even further than that. It's just that I need to get these words out of me for some reason now, more so than ever.
Yes.
Not a minute more. Get these words out. These same 5 words that need to come out of me. I need to put them on paper. I need to put them somewhere so that they can breathe their own air.
That's powerful.
I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
totally. Yeah, I mean, I would love to like talk more about that, and because I wonder if in some way that has to do with how the pandemic has maybe reminded us or shown us how uncertain life is.
Oh, very much so. I agree with that 100%.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Because if you really think about it, you can walk outside. It is so beautiful now that the weather has changed, but it's also dangerous at the same time. It's beautiful and dangerous at the exact same time, in the exact same instant. Wow. I don't know where I'm going with this tonight, but...
No, this is good. This is good, yes. And you know, to continue with that, it is beautiful and dangerous at the same time, and more so now than ever, I think there's this clarity about how unpredictable the next moment is.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Because we don't know. We don't know.
No, we've not been here before. We don't know.
No, we've never been here before. Wow. Let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back, okay? All right, we'll be right back. We are back. I am here with Jacinta V. White. Jacinta, question for you. Poets write for a myriad of reasons. Some write primarily to speak a message to their audience, while others write because to stay silent is not an option. Why do you write? You and I go way back. We go way back. Decades.
I know. Wow. Beautiful. I write.
Why do you write?
I don't feel that I have a choice. And I say that because it's similar to what you said about your writing now, and that you have to get the words out so that they can breathe. I feel like I have to write because the poems do not belong to me. Doesn't mean that I'm writing for an audience, but it means that they're not mine to keep to myself. I write to stay sane. I write to remember and to record, to catalog. I write to get in touch with myself and my thoughts. I write to pay tribute.
Please share another poem.
Okay, well, this one's a little longer than the other ones, but and talking about the state of the world. And, you know, these poems were written like 2015 to 2018. but this one's called Body. Sun-scarred body, coming from between your mother's legs, 60 extra bones scrape her full-figured body. In this body, you are threatened by your threatening dark skin. I see your dark sky purple grapes massaged by drunkards who refuse to look at your body for what it is. Eat the white cracker, drink the purple wine. This is the body. They digest hums about being on knees, holding pages of ritual between shallow breaths. If only it were that easy. Shedding sin every hour like shedding 600,000 skin particles. Count them. You. Can't you see them falling? The bodies, the black bodies of children, the black bodies of husbands, the black bodies of wives, the black bodies of prostitutes, the black bodies of pimps, the black bodies of preachers, the black bodies of poets, the black bodies of the unarmed and unnamed. Count the bodies and black body bags, and I will count the pages and bodies of work that talk about black body subjugation, about black women bodies sexualization, about black men bodies degradation. When I touch your black chest to make sure your heart isn't still, eventually you guide my fingers to read your nipples like Braille. I think of the 100,000 miles of blood we traveled into these bodies, and I want to know what your body feels like. If it feels like my body, if it feels like you're running out of air, if you feel awkward walking into a room with your body because it's so much like your grandmother's body, and your grandmother's body wasn't wanted even by her newborns, or if your body feels like a bullet target. I pull your body close to mine every moment I can, as if mine is a bulletproof body shield, giving warmth so you won't die and my arms are out there later. Have your body placed in a black body bag, and I get called to identify your body. Write your name on a tag with a black permanent marker before they give me what you wore against your body, against your black body, against your body. This is the body. This is the body. This is the body that was broken. And that's body.
Body.
Yeah.
What do you hope readers get from encountering your work?
I hope that they are moved to a place that they recognize their grief, and not for them to feel sad and you know, to be in despair, but to see and to sense how language and how art can transcend the pain and can be a catalyst for healing.
That was beautifully stated.
Thank you.
What's next for you creatively?
I'm asking myself that same question.
Come on now, talk to me. It's just you and I. These
Okay.
800,000 listeners, they're not out there. It's just you and I now. We're just talking. Just shooting the breeze.
Great.
What's next for you?
Really, that is a great question. I am in this place of what is known in transition language as neutral ground. I am thinking about another collection. I feel like I'm being called to really write about the body. So it's interesting that was the last piece that I read.
Yes.
The beauty, the complexity, the frailty of the body, and that's all I have. That's all I know. There's still Snapdragon Journal. There's the Work Project. I feel that those are creative endeavors as well. But in terms of my own writing, I think I want to study and play around some more with the idea of the body.
Well, tell us before we go about the Word Project and Snapdragon. Tell us about those two entities.
Yes. So in 2001, I established the Word Project, which is a company where we use poetry and art as catalysts for self-discovery and healing. So poetry workshops, discussions, art journaling, all of that, again, as a way for people to connect with themselves and to use art to be a mirror and to help them to transcend the pain. 7 years ago, out of the Word Project, Snapdragon, a journal of art and healing, was born. And it is a quarterly. We publish those from across the globe. We publish poetry, creative nonfiction, and photography, all with a healing bent, emerging as well as established writers and artists. And we are open for submissions April the 1st through the 15th on the theme anger. And everyone can find out about that at snapdragonjournal.com. So I try to really hold space for others that are using art, just as I have and continue to help with the healing journey.
I'm sitting here with a smile on my face because I can't believe you're with me tonight.
I know. I know. I feel the same way.
You've been my hero, my shero forever. Things that I've wanted to do that I failed to do, not because I didn't want to, it's just that I just didn't have the intestinal fortitude to continue on, but where you did. You made a way out of no way. And I think that's just so fantastic. I am so proud of you. You're one of my favorite people. One of my favorite people.
Your invitation and our conversation has meant so much to me.
Well, thank you, Jacinta. I mean, I'm going to call you my friend.
Yes, please do.
I want to thank you for spending time. The hour's over. We've got like a minute left.
Oh.
It's been wonderful. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to say good night to you.
Good night. Let's stay in touch.
Yes, we'll need to do. Yes, we will. We will. Okay. And to our listening audience, as I share with you every week, let poetry ring. Good night, everybody. Good night, Jacinta.
Good night. Thank you.